Today, I'm going to just try and teach you a little bit about the intricacies of Bitcoin cryptocurrencies. There's a little bit of some legal involvement towards the end of it, but we'll see if we have time to get all the way through it. It's a little bit long. Alright, so there's a lot of technical terms in this. So if you need me to slow down or you need me to explain something, please do, because I would rather explain the concept of Bitcoin than have everybody actually understand what it is, than get through all the legal jargon towards the end. So I'm going to talk about cryptocurrencies in general, but I'm going to talk about specific ones as well. So on the front slide it shows Dash, Ethereum, Bitcoin, IOTA, Monero, and Ripple. There's like 1,600 cryptocurrencies right now. And that's because everybody keeps essentially printing their own money in this environment. And that happens through ICOs, which I'll talk about a little bit later on.
Can Cummins and White do its own?
Cummins and White coin.
Cummins and White?
If you saw Dennis Rodman, he's wearing a pot coin shirt in North Korea right now. So, all right. So, does anybody actually know what Bitcoin is and can actually explain it offhand? No? All right. So, on October 31st, 2008, this paper came out. It's a white paper written by Satoshi Nakamoto. It's called Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. So this came out right after the 2008 crisis, 30 days or so. But what exactly is Bitcoin? Based on the very first line of this abstract, it reads, a purely peer-to-peer version of electronic cash, which would allow online payments to be sent directly from one party to another without going through a financial institution. All right, to provide a little bit more insight, and here's where I feel like you might get a little bit lost, so I'll go slow. So Bitcoin is essentially an electronic currency, but what does that mean? It's stored on electronic wallets, much like you would put your cash into a normal wallet. And having funds on an electronic wallet would be similar to keeping essentially a gift card balance on your Amazon account. So you upload money and then you happen to have $50 in Amazon or something like that.
So it's more like that than actually a bank account?
It acts like both, but I feel like that's the most analogous way to draw the line. Really what it is in these electronic wallets, what you're holding is just a string of computer code. And each string of computer code has a unique digital signature that states essentially that's your code, it belongs to this wallet. It cannot be copied to another wallet unless they want you to. One thing that I believe some people are confused about when it comes to Bitcoin is you can have far less than one Bitcoin. You don't have to sell one Bitcoin or buy one Bitcoin.
Let me ask, where do the Bitcoins actually come from? Like who generates them?
Okay, so it's considered proof of work. The way that it's created is you have to mine for them.
So it's the miners that actually create the Bitcoin?
They're the ones that create the Bitcoin by doing, if you do a transaction to transaction, that creates the process of mining as well.
But wouldn't you'd have to own a Bitcoin and someone else would have to
So
own a Bitcoin.
you can just mine it as well. You don't have to necessarily help with the transfer from one person to another, but there's a certain allowance of coins allowed at any point in time, and you can keep mining.
So where does that allowance come from?
Essentially, it's written into the code itself.
Written into the code itself. Okay.
Yeah, so by the time all the Bitcoins will be out there.
And that's my question, is there going to be a finite supply, or
there
will
is.
they constantly be
21 million is the cap, and there'll be no more.
And you cannot go over the cap, and nothing can change that?
Unless they rewrote the entire code, but that would be pretty much.
And who's responsible for rewriting the code, or writing the code?
So the code is on, I'll go into that a little bit more.
Yeah.
But essentially the code's on a network, so it's not any one particular person. Essentially, if you think about Amazon, they have a server farm and every bit of Amazon is run from that server. But what if instead all of us were the ones that kept Amazon afloat? So everybody had a
It's the
server
community.
here.
So what you're saying is a community.
Yeah, so it's a community. So if any one person went down, you would continue to have it. It would be maybe slower by that much more, but it's not gonna completely fade away.
Well, then if there's a finite supply, then at some point, what's gonna justify any value increase or decrease?
The finite supply. The fact that it is limited in quantity would make it more valuable than less valuable.
Right, sure, but at some point,
There'll be no more Bitcoin, it'll be really valuable like gold, and then people move on to Monero and Bitcoin will be worthless.
right, exactly,
Could be.
yeah, that's what the thing is, at some
Right.
point, right?
Well, so it's just if Bitcoin becomes it is the original cryptocurrency. It's the first one that came out. It started in 2009 compared to probably the 1400 that have come out in the last 3 years or so.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the one that most people follow, and they use it they coin it as gold in terms of everything else. So if you have Ethereum being silver or Ripple being copper, it's the most trusted of all of them.
But it's not backed by anything, right?
No.
Like the full faith and credit clause, right?
No.
US dollar.
But in those instances, it would most likely be considered a security.
Sure, but I guess my thing is, once all the Bitcoins are out there,
Yeah.
right? I mean, what's gonna justify the value of Bitcoin? Like, why would the value go up at that point? Or even, I guess I could say going
Supply
down,
and
'cause people would
demand.
leave to go to a different cryptocurrency like Monero, like you were just talking about.
Supply and demand would be it. But I'll keep going through this. So it can be as small as 1/100 millionth of one coin. So you don't have to buy one coin. Nobody can afford $7,500 to buy one coin, and that would be a little bit ridiculous. But you could buy up to 1/100 millionth of the one coin, or of the 21 million total that will exist. When it's transferred from one person to another, the code is entirely rewritten, so it becomes a unique coin in itself. The reason why this is important is the fact that it's so easy to copy and transmit data, but it's hard to copy and transmit one piece of data, transfer it, and then no longer have it existing on that original location. So that's kind of one bit about the cryptographic aspect of it that a lot of people enjoy. That's primarily why it started on the black market as well, because it was hard to trace them. Alright, so when a transaction happens from A to B, it's written onto a ledger, essentially like a stock ledger, and that's what blockchain technology is. So that's probably a buzzword that everybody's heard here at least once. Everybody wants to put everything on it. Real estate, they want to put all title and on it, so that way it's a trusted source. You don't have to go through a title company anymore. It'll just instantly be on the blockchain. The benefit of it being on the blockchain is that you cannot replicate the data. It cannot be spent more than once, and the difficulty in hacking or copying it it's a pretty big obstacle to overcome.
So when the hacking happened over the weekend in Southeast Asia, which caused Bitcoin's value to drop yesterday by about 20%, did they hack the blockchain, or did they steal from people's wallets?
So typically what they're doing is they're doing phishing scams, and they're stealing the information from the individuals rather than hacking onto a blockchain. So it's easier to hack into an exchange because you have probably one employee that will open an email that will give them all the passwords that they need. Do you have a question?
Oh, no.
Oh, okay. And I think actually the biggest reason that it dropped was because there was a CFTC probe that went into 4 different exchanges at the same time over the weekend. So now everybody's getting a little bit scared of the regulators. Okay, so here is kind of the whole process, and I have a video that follows, so if you don't understand it, there's another chance to catch up. So somebody requests a transaction, it goes into the network. What happens is it needs essentially 6 verifications to pass on to somebody else. So it essentially validates that the original person owned that coin, and it will do that with 6 different users, whoever 6 different people on the network are. Alright, once this has resulted, the transaction will complete, but there's any amount of reasons why it won't necessarily result, such as a lack of funds in a wallet, or if the network is too slow. Back in December, when the coin was $21,000, the network got bogged down so much that transaction fees were about 5 times as high. And if you didn't pay premium fees, then your coin would get stuck in limbo for about 24 to 48 hours. So that's one issue that they're trying to resolve, in the expediency of the network as a whole. Alright, so once it's verified, it goes on to what the blockchain is, which is essentially a large list that says who transferred the coin, how much was transferred, what time was it transferred. When another transfer happens, it takes all that data and it writes on top of it who transferred, how much was transferred, when was it transferred, and it does it again and again. So the ledger is a list of every transaction that has happened in terms of Bitcoin from 2009, when it originally started. All right, I'm gonna go to the video to explain it a little bit better. So let's group on commercial first.
Just because you pay less with Groupon doesn't mean you get less. Haircuts 60% off, nails 50% off.
Oh, lag.
Lost in a cryptocurrency mix.
Is everybody here?
Famous incarnation Bitcoin are based on extremely complicated puzzles. These puzzles are programmed into the source code for Bitcoin. Roughly every 10 minutes or so, a new puzzle is released. Computers all over the world race to solve it. Because the value of Bitcoin has gone up so markedly over the last year or so, well, this activity has become more and more popular. It can be fabulously lucrative. It's called Bitcoin mining.
Cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin don't have a central register. Their strength comes from having what is called a distributed ledger. It's a blockchain. The blocks on the blockchain contain details of every transaction in the currency's history. As new transactions happen, they have to be placed in blocks and added to the chain. A new block contains roughly 2,500 new transactions. And to validate the new block, each one contains the answer to the puzzle from the last block.
Success. This is the work that the Bitcoin miners are doing, and if they, like me, succeed and solve the puzzle first, well, their reward is 12.5 freshly released Bitcoin. And then, well, the whole process starts again with a new puzzle.
The more computers and more computing power that's actually mining Bitcoin, the more secure the network is from some type of cyber attack or attempted theft. The Bitcoin miners are also processing the transactions. So if I were to send a Bitcoin to you, a miner would actually verify that that transaction was legitimate before it is added to the blockchain, which is simply a ledger of all the Bitcoin transactions in existence.
So what does Bitcoin mining actually look like? Well, it's taking place through those doors. I'm in a facility somewhere near London, that's all I can tell you. We're not allowed to give its precise location. And you may be able to detect already something about Bitcoin mining. It's incredibly noisy, and it's about to get a whole lot noisier when we go in there, so we need these. And the first thing you notice in here is it's not only extremely noisy, it's extremely hot as well.
Today's miners aren't the grimy-faced men of granite of the past. Today, they have silk pocket squares.
Can you open it up and we can have a look at something? Don't show the combination. So these are Bitcoin miners.
Vlad Polachowski runs 63 mining computers.
It is like a head.
This is, he says, a spectacularly profitable enterprise.
But, of course, there is no guarantee in anything. Even if you buy like dollars or euro, there's no guarantee because the price keeps changing, it's volatility. You can guarantee your result in Bitcoins. So basically, you already know the network difficulty, you can keep track of it, you know the performance of your miners, and you know your running costs. So it's quite easy to calculate your net profit in Bitcoins. What you don't know is the Bitcoin exchange rate at any given time. So you, of course, depend on Bitcoin's volatility.
And what is the profit margin in an industry like Bitcoin mining now?
Well, the profit margin, it doesn't really matter where you are. You can be in the UK, you can be in China, in Iceland and other countries. But roughly, usually, your running costs are about 25% of your revenue, which makes your net profit around 75%, which is a very high margin.
And that's why lots of people are in it now.
Yes, I think so.
There is huge concern about how much energy is now being spent Bitcoin mining. All those computers churning away all over the world. Estimates vary about how much power they're using. Some say it's as much as Monaco uses annually. Others say it's the same as Ireland's annual consumption.
I think what gets missed often in this conversation is that the costs of other aspects of our financial system, the mining of the metals that go into our coins, the operations of payment centers and bank branches and ATMs, paper and currency, shipping all this around, is also consuming a lot of electricity. It has a pretty big carbon footprint as well. And when you kind of compare Bitcoin's carbon footprint to our current financial system's carbon footprint, it doesn't look quite as bad.
The amount of energy used by Bitcoin is going up and up, partly because people are using more and more powerful computers for mining. The Bitcoin algorithm actually adjusts the difficulty of the problem to make sure it only gets solved every 10 minutes. As the total computing power engaged in mining goes up, so does the difficulty.
Nobody really expected it will become such a big thing. So in the beginning, you just had people mining Bitcoins with their laptops and computers. So it was relatively easy to get one. Mostly people are using ant miners that come from China. They're kind of very optimized, very powerful graphic cards, but only can do one task. They can only mine Bitcoins. So you can't use them for any other currencies apart from Bitcoin Cash.
So which direction is this currency going now? The only thing that we can say for sure is that the Bitcoin mines will fall silent one day. Bitcoin source code only allows the creation of 21 million Bitcoin, which, at the rate the puzzle is being solved every 10 minutes, will hit in 2140. What a Bitcoin will be worth next week is hard enough to predict, so who knows what the economics of this cryptocurrency will be by then.
It's a good video.
So that kind of explain it a little bit more. So what's gonna happen after, since 12.5 half Bitcoin are kind of the reward. What they'll do is they'll do solely transaction fees. So a percentage of what you transfer is gonna go to the miner instead. So what can cryptocurrency be used for? Some of the biggest names and companies are actually accepting it in terms of payment. Overstock, Expedia, Newegg, Shopify, PayPal, Subway, Microsoft, Reddit, Cheap Air, Wikipedia, Gifts, Bloomberg, Etsy, Intuit, Dish Network.
And the Lamborghini dealer in Newport now.
Them too, yeah.
Who else but drug dealers are buying Lambos? I'm sorry, go ahead.
Another one is money transfer. In late April, $99 million worth of Litecoin was transferred on April, just late April. It took 2.5 minutes to do the transfer, and it was completely verified. It only cost 40 cents in transaction fees.
Was that through an exchange or private?
That was through an exchange. Because there's now there's something called the Lightning Network where two users can pay each other directly without actually going through blockchain. But that's a little too much for this presentation. And then store of value, a lot of economists say that just holding it in itself based on essentially its continuing usage rate and the fact that there's only a finite amount, it should continue to go in price, but based on the volatility of the market, we'll see if that's actually the case. All right, so here's a couple different ones. Ethereum is the second most well-known cryptocurrency based on market capitalization. It's worth about half that of Bitcoin. And the reason that people like using it are for smart contracts and distributed applications. So smart contract is a computer protocol intended to digitally facilitate, verify, or enforce the negotiation or performance of a contract without a third party. So anything that can be done between two parties that's purely objective, you can measure the result. You will receive this much money if this happens or if this doesn't happen. They can go through smart contracts. They're generally used to transfer some sort of property in a transparent and conflict-free way. An example would be you want to rent an apartment, but you must do so before a specified date. If you provide money to the landlord before the specified date, instead you'll receive an electronic key for the apartment. If you don't receive it before the specified date, you don't receive the key and the money is returned. And then distributed applications, they get the benefit of essentially riding on a network as well. So if any one independent source shuts down, it continues to exist on the network as a whole.
I have a question.
Yes.
How do you distinguish between the service providing like smart contracts versus the cryptocurrency, or is it indistinguishable?
So that's all about how the code is written. So if you transfer an Ethereum token, you can essentially write additional code into it. And so when you transfer it, you're adding on benefits. So Bitcoin is purely just you're passing this source of data, which is the coin, from here to here.
Without any additions.
Without any additions. So Bitcoin in a lot of respects wouldn't exist if it wasn't the first one, because it is the most, if you could think of like the most basic car, it is the most basic car, whereas all these additional ones have all the bells and whistles and they keep improving and getting better. Does that answer your question? Okay, so here are a couple more. Ripple, which is most well known, it's used with banks. Most large scale financial institutions are using it to transfer substantial sums of money for very cheap costs. IOTA it's essentially another distributed ledger or blockchain that records transactions that happen between the Internet of Things, or the Internet of Things is devices interacting with one another.
So these really aren't currencies, these are more data processing.
Exactly.
Right, okay.
Secure
But-
transactions.
Using the blockchain.
Yes, but a lot of people are holding them because the market is so volatile that you can hold IOTA, or if you held Ripple January 1st, 2017, you bought $1 into it. If you held that same amount of Ripple by January 1st, 2018, it would have been worth $35,000, that $1. So the speculation and the volatility of the market, people are looking at it as, you know, the faster version of the stock market.
Can I see a prospectus, please?
All right, and then IOTA, it actually works in the opposite way of Bitcoin, in which it's more efficient with microtransactions, so very, very small transactions. If a bunch of people are linked up, the more people that are linked up, the cheaper it gets, as well as the faster the connection speed. And it doesn't run on blockchain technology, it's called the Tangle, which is, it's essentially the same thing, they just use a different name for it. All right. So legal issues with cryptocurrency, the ones that I can see at least, it's pretty broad in terms of the issues. Securities and commodities laws. Each cryptocurrency is different. It's offered in a different way. We'll see in a little bit that a bunch of different regulatory agencies, the SEC, the CFTC, the EU, all look at it in different ways. And then also when you issue new tokens through ICOs, which we'll talk about in a little bit, are they considered securities or are they considered property like the IRS considers Bitcoin? Intellectual property rights. Can blockchains be copyrighted or can they be patented? That's actually a legal issue that some people are trying to patent these. Unfair competition, similar to intellectual property rights. Can you have trade secret blockchains? You know, can you have closed code that isn't available for everybody to see, where somebody comes in, they dismantle the code and they rewrite it themselves? Licensing regulatory laws. What I've had at least one person ask me, do you need a license? Do you need a financial advisor if you're recommending what coins to buy? Or the regulatory framework for people that want to create an exchange or an escrow platform or anything else to transfer from one party to another. One that I think is going to be really interesting is estate planning. The whole concept of cryptocurrency is the fact that it is secretive in nature. When you have an electronic wallet, it's an 86 letter or digit password. It's usually 12 words in order, but it's not something that anybody can necessarily hack into or use brute force power to break into somebody's wallet. So if somebody doesn't pass on their password, it's pretty much gone. It's actually stated that at least 25% of all the Bitcoin that exists will never be recovered at this point in time, because people had it in 2009 when it was worth 12 cents a coin, and then here it is a little bit under 7,000, and they want to know what happened to their 10,000 Bitcoins. Another one is tax evasion or tax issues. The IRS considers a transaction, a taxable transaction, the purchase, sale, trading of cryptos, or the exchanging of crypto. All of those are considered taxable events. So in 2015, only 802 people recorded gains or losses on their Bitcoin investment, which is 0.04% of all filers. So it doesn't seem like everybody's actually being honest. All right, so there's a little bit of confusion about what Bitcoin is at this point. Is it security, is it a commodity, is it property, or is it currency? Luckily, just last week, Jay Clayton, SEC chair, said that cryptocurrency such as Bitcoin that acts to replace sovereign currencies are not considered securities. Additionally, in 2014, the IRS actually put out a notice claiming that Bitcoin is property. And the CFTC claims that it is a commodity. And recently, on March 6, 2018, Judge Jack Weinstein of the Eastern District of New York found that virtual currencies such as Bitcoin are considered commodities. So he actually agreed with the CFTC. Now, that could actually change the way that it's taxed if after this year the IRS decides to change that it's property rather than commodity for, I believe, short-term and long-term capital gains purposes. Now, the EU is on the opposite end of the spectrum, and it says it's a currency. It acts just like a fiat currency, like everything else. Now, in terms of the world, you could see here a bunch of different countries don't even view it the same. So, in Japan, it's considered legal tender. Iceland, it's outright bans. You're not allowed to trade cryptocurrencies in the country. South Korea, it's not illegal, but uses for illegal activities will be prosecuted. That tends to be very common in most countries. I couldn't put the list of 100 or so countries, so I just grabbed a few. Mexico, it's considered a virtual asset. India, it's not legal tender, but for financing illegal activities, you'll be prosecuted. And then Germany, it's considered a unit account or private money. So they view it completely differently than fiat currency. All right, so the way to determine whether these tokens, since there's 1,600 and all of them are different than Bitcoin, is a security or property, as similar to Bitcoin. There's the SEC v. Howey test. That's the most commonly invoked test to determine whether it's considered a security. So there's 4 aspects to it. Is there an investment of money? Was there an expectation of profits from the investment? Was the investment in a common enterprise? And was the profit that came from such an investment derived from the efforts of somebody else? All right, so here's kind of what I was talking about. So there are, again, 1,600 cryptocurrencies at this point. It looks like people are just printing money. What they're doing is they're launching a business idea, and what they do is they exchange other cryptocurrencies for their own token. So typically somebody will do a pre-sale. Hey, if you buy into our pre-sale, you'll get 25% off all tokens before they hit the secondary market. It's similar to, I guess, an IPO offering. That's what many people compare it to. And one aspect of these ICOs is that they are not backed, they are generally not backed or secured by underlying assets. So this is I think this is one of the most relevant reasons why we should learn about Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies, is because it has become an entirely new fundraising mechanism. It's made a lot of people wealthy, so there's a lot of new money out there, and there's a lot of new business ideas in this area. Here's a couple of reasons why ICOs are dangerous, though. There's a lot of fraud, so due to the sheer volume of ICOs, there's bound to be some bad apples. Just from January to June of this year to May, the end of May, there's been 414 ICOs, which doubled that of last year, which was 210, and the year before there was 43. So these are becoming a lot more prevalent. There have been several ICOs that blatantly lie about business partnerships. I'll talk about one in a little bit. It's called Titanium Blockchain Infrastructure Services. And what the ICO claimed was they had business partnerships with tremendous companies like PayPal, Verizon, Boeing, or Walt Disney Company, when in fact they never talked to them. There was nothing along those lines. There was actually another one that said that they already had Visa committed to them, but that never happened. Embezzlement, a company called Confido raised $375,000, and one of the officers of the company decided to split overnight.
So if I want to put on one of these ICOs, I don't have to register this with any entity, federal government agency or anything like that before I just put it out there?
So that's how a lot of them have been actually trying to raise funds. Because of the statements made by Jay Clayton last week, I believe that that's about to stop very drastically. He makes statements along the lines of, if you want to do an ICO and you want to play by the private placement rules, then file a private placement. This is why the reason a lot of them are dangerous. They don't have to register, so people are kind of just creating this website that they think will attract a lot of people, and I'll show you a couple about, you know, there's promises of profits, and we're the newest, hottest company out there on the blockchain, because blockchain is just a buzzword at this point. And then the third one is unsophisticated purchasers. Back in December, people started taking out mortgages, secondary mortgages, just to buy Bitcoin, and then pretty much a couple of weeks later, their whatever Bitcoin they bought drops to about 30% of its original investment. All right, so something that the SEC did to educate investors was they actually created a fake ICO website to see, which I'm sure everybody's gonna be able to guess it, but there are some ridiculous ones that it makes it difficult to actually see what is a real ICO and what is not a real ICO. All right, so Dentacoin, the blockchain solution for the dental industry. This would include it would help to share information about dental insurance, healthcare records, and reviews of dentists. All right, so this is unbanked the unbanked. It's called OMSGO, but it goes by the acronym OMG. It would enable financial inclusion and interoperability through its network, essentially acting as a gateway and clearinghouse for digital payments. Now we got Howie coins.
Given players.
All right, so Howie Coin wants to replace the travel, or to place the travel industry on the blockchain. Howie Coin would work with travel companies to create partnerships that would create additional incentives for its users. So this happens to be the fake website. Based on SEC v. Howie, they decided to make Howie Coin.
So the other two are real and this one's the fake one?
Yeah. So that's just to prove. That's just to prove.
The first two are real?
The first
two are real.
No way.
Brutal!
OMG.
OMG is real.
Both of these are actually the top, I think they're the top 30 or 40 traded cryptocurrencies in the market.
Wow.
Which one's the OMG? What's the name?
It's OMSGO.
Okay, that one's like promising, right? For now.
Yeah, it's supposed to be a platform. One of their main things is they want to have one wallet for all cryptocurrencies. Right now, it's every company creates some sort of digital wallet themselves, but they don't have cross-platform functionality. So you may have one wallet for one coin and one wallet for another, which is just difficult to remember that many passwords, especially because they're all 86 character phrases or 12 words.
Wow.
All right, so nobody's gonna be able to read this, but essentially it's a white paper. They created a white paper for Howie Coin. And it has vague yet enticing details that show year-over-year expected growth, and its use as an investment tool with expected returns. It's really hard for unsophisticated purchasers, because although the unsophisticated purchasers usually cannot buy directly from these pre-sale events, they could still buy them on the secondary market. And in this secondary market, it's not regulated, so there's a lot of pump and dump schemes.
Let me ask you about the secondary markets really quick. So Bitcoin currently is the only one that's traded on the CBOE, right? And so
Only futures of it are.
Right. But the only crypto that's on the CBOE.
But the crypto
so-
isn't, it's a future of it, it's a,
Yeah.
it's a
Right,
bet.
yeah,
Right,
that's
right,
what I
right.
mean, sorry, the futures, right, futures and options, so you could short them, right? On the other exchanges, crypto exchanges, where either Bitcoin is exchanged or any other cryptocurrency, can you short any of these cryptos, or do you have to buy essentially long positions in them, whether it's the crypto itself or a derivative? I'm assuming all the other exchanges don't have derivatives like futures or options.
There's no derivatives, but the way that the market, I still think that you can play it short.
On the other exchanges?
Yeah,
How do
well,
you play,
so-
how do you play it short?
The way that the market moves is based entirely on news, just similar to the normal stock market.
Yeah.
But what's happening is it creates such swings based on the volatility that as soon as you hear something good, IOTA had a deal where they partnered with Microsoft. As soon as that happened, you see a 30% spike overnight. But the news usually takes a little while to actually keep up. So if you actually, as soon as you hear something like that, you can make the decision, I think that it's going to go up. You buy, it increases exponentially. And just as good news kind of fades away, you
Right.
sell before it comes
But
crashing down.
on the exchanges, not the CBOE, right?
No.
So let's say you're on one of the crypto exchanges. Is there anything you can do so you don't have the crypto, but you want to do a short trade?
There's
You
no other
can't-
derivatives.
Okay, so but there's no process to short a crypto on one of the other exchanges. Let's say like IOTA, right?
Are you talking
One of
about
the-
arbitrage? You could
Arbitrage.
essentially, you could be on different exchanges, all of which track different prices.
Okay, I understand that, but you can't be on one of the exchanges and short one of these cryptos.
No.
You'd only have to buy like puts on the CBOE for Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Correct? Currently, that's all
Yeah.
you could do.
That's all you can do, but there's been multiple attempts to get ETFs up and going, the Winklevoss
'Cause
twins.
but the ETF, can you short the ETFs or no?
Well, you could have a bearish position or a bullish position. That would be the only two that I could
Okay,
assume.
but you have to buy the ETF.
Yeah. Only the
Instrument-
derivatives you could
instrument.
short, and it's only for Bitcoin.
Right, got it. And it's only on the CBOE. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Actually, no, it's on two different.
Oh,
But
is it?
I don't know what the other platform is off
Okay.
the top of my head. Alright, so there's 3 ICOs that were stopped or were refunded, or this SEC caused them to refund their initial investment. So the Dow, on July 25th, 2017, the SEC issued a report about the issuance of a token called the Decentralized Autonomous Organization Token by Slockit. Essentially, it's supposed to be an organization that existed on the internet. No one particular person had control of it. It was found to be a security. Users of the DAO token would use their tokens to invest into projects proposed on its platform. So you could go into the DAO platform, you could see 20 different projects that were proposed. And users that held a DAO token could submit their vote by essentially using their one token towards one of the projects. Whoever had the most tokens going towards that project was funded. And what the expectation is once the project was completed, any profits that were created in this project would be distributed to all of the DAO token holders based on the percentage interest in their voting rights. So, by going back to the Howey test, there was investment of money into the DAO tokens. There was an expectation of profits. Profits were supposed to be returned. The investment of money was into the common enterprise. It was the one project leader that would move the project forward, and it was also the project leader that did all the work. So they voted, they used their token, and they just expect to receive profits in the end. All right, Munchie tokens, which was for a food app.
Isn't that a chip?
I think it is. They merged with Potcoin, I think.
Good partnership, right there. All right, so Munchie was an ICO seeking to raise $15 million to improve an existing iPhone app revolved around the restaurant industry. So meal reviews, as well as creating essentially a platform where people could sell recipes, they could actually sell produce, sell a bunch of things onto this ecosystem. Users would receive tokens based on either selling something through the ecosystem or by writing a food review or something like that. So it was essentially like a reward for participating in the platform. So the ICO was halted after Munchie received a letter from the SEC saying it was a security, stop what you're doing. And it goes into a similar approach taken to the previous one, DAO. There was the belief that as soon as somebody distributed these Munchie tokens, they would continue to rise in value as the platform grew, whether or not you were actually participating in it or not. So it again meets all of the elements of the Howey test. Now this is one I touched on real quick in the beginning, Titanium Blockchain Infrastructure Services, Inc. So this one isn't necessarily considered a security, but it was stopped based on the fraudulent statements that were made by Michael Stollery. He was the one that made statements that, yes, we partner with PayPal and we partner with the Walt Disney Company. So they had actually raised 21 million. By the way, a lot of these ICOs, they raise a ridiculous amount of money in a ridiculously short time. Some are 120 million that are funded in 3 minutes. Some are, it's essentially crowdfunding on the internet. So he made a lot of fabricated testimonials about the corporate customers, and he used social media and a lot of advertisement space. So this is one of the reasons why Facebook, Google, all these platforms and Twitter decided that they were going to stop ICOs from publishing or advertising on all these platforms. So he was hit with A and 10b-5c of the Securities Exchange
Must have held
Act.
it as security, must have met the Howey test.
Yeah.
So does the registration, didn't meet the registration requirements, isn't this a violation of anti-fraud?
Exactly. So this is kind of the point that I'm trying to make. How is it that the ICOs are going to continue and they're going to continue to grow, but after the statements that Jay Clayton has made, we know that we're capable of staying within the confines of the law by actually going through the PPM requirements or registering as a PPM.
So by his statement, Bitcoin, which really tries to act just as a currency to buy other things, isn't a security.
It's not, but it's one of the few, if not the only one, that acts in that way.
All the others though are like security.
So by Jay Clayton's own statement, any time he's seen an ICO, it's been a security.
Yeah.
Every ICO he's ever seen has been a security. So we're in a realm where the law can't compete with the speed of the technology. So we're gonna have to see how all these funds are distributed back, because they're too busy to chase after 1,600 people at this point. They have created a whole new unit, a cyber unit for it, but we'll see how that actually works out.
How do you find them all if it's cryptocurrency?
So there have been statements saying essentially the NSA can track every single Bitcoin that's ever been transferred based on IP address. So it's not as anonymous as most people think. There are some coins that are supposed to be entirely privatized, and those are actually illegal in a lot of countries that do allow it. So Monero, Dash are considered completely illegal in a lot of countries.
Well, I mean, if you had like securities litigation where there's 1,000 people that got, ripped off in an ICO.
Yeah.
how do you get those people together? How do you get data out of the defendant company? Like one purchaser at a time has to bring suit?
I guess you would do a class action, start showing some infomercials.
But you can't
about
identify
it.
the class without having access to the data, right?
Yeah. Another problem that's posed with
Yeah.
all of these. All right. So essentially, Bitcoin, not a security, everything else is a security. As long as we comply with PPM and registration requirements, then it seems to be fine. So it benefits blockchain technology and cryptocurrency. Blockchain is allegedly the new internet, or internet 3.0. So we can update how funds can be sourced, internet crowdfunding, electronic and verified sources without intermediaries. That's the blockchain aspect. Reduce fraudulent currencies, lower costs to create and maintain the currencies. It's an immediate settlement of funds. Typically, these are widespread, recognized and accepted. Bitcoin is accepted all around the world at this point in time, as well as new business ventures and new and different sources of capital. There's a lot of different businesses that people are trying to make out of this. There's a lot of different money that's coming from it as well. All right, so I answered some questions throughout, but I feel like I've probably created more questions than answered at this point.
Okay, so if the value is based upon the limited supply, but you can continue to create an unlimited number of new cryptocurrencies, why is there any value to Bitcoin at all? Merely because it's established?
That's most likely the reason, is that it's actually established. A lot of the ICOs, they've actually dipped below what their original selling price was. So for a lot of these companies, they've essentially failed, and they've been pushed out of the market. So it's gonna be, although it creates less barriers to entry by allowing yourself to just print money, now that the SEC and CFTC are gonna be regulating it, there are gonna be some of those barriers. So you're not gonna see somebody just throwing out a white paper and somebody just trying to start a business.
So it's like the old coinage adage, good money drives out bad. But in theory, there's no reason why new cryptocurrencies that follow the Bitcoin model couldn't be created and mined and operated the same way, right?
Correct. Any other questions?
A few months ago, I was watching like Fox Business or CNBC or something, and they had a person on there who had a blockchain company that was quote providing blockchain for businesses. Was that the one that was a fraudulent, or is there another one that's real?
This one happened less than 2 weeks ago that they issued that statement about the blockchain services. I think the one you're talking about is, there was this company called the Long Island Lemonade Company or something like that. And what they did was they changed their name to the Long Island Lemonade Blockchain Company. And their stock instantly went up 300% in a matter of hours. And the SEC actually halted trading as soon as they did it. So that's why I went back, or that's why I could come back and say blockchain is the new buzzword. Everybody wants to have blockchain something or another.
Nice.
I think there was 2 different companies that happened with.
So I've heard and read about smart contracts and then using blockchain technology for secure transactions purposes. Do you see this becoming standard, or is this are there lots of real estate transactions happening that way? Other types of typical contracts going into smart contracts, or how much is that taking off, and how can we learn more about that?
I think it's gonna definitely change at least the real estate market. When it comes to, so again, the main purpose of blockchain is trading some sort of property or some sort of objective idea. I think if you've received property or you haven't received property, that's the easiest way, that's a very easy way to identify whether that's happening. So in terms of blockchain, I do think it's here to last. In terms of smart contracts, I still think that attorneys are needed. It's very difficult. There's so much that isn't objective when it comes to the work that we do. A lot of it is subjective, or you know, it's objective in the eyes of a judge or a jury. It's not something that can readily be identified.
Great job, Anthony, thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.